want to talk about the media here for a second, Dan. I was talking to someone this weekend, and I'll give more details about this in the next segment too. But this person is against Trump because chaos follows him. It's that whole thing. And I made the argument briefly that it's the media that made everyone hysterical. There's no need for all the hysteria. There was no need for all the chaos during the Trump presidency. It was totally, completely contrived and unnecessary from the beginning. Do you believe that's true? And do you have an example?
Oh, I mean, I think there's 4 years of examples. They warned everybody. Trump is Trump is worse than Hitler. I mean, you can find media stories saying that. And now he's going to end democracy. Remember, the Washington Post coming out changing their motto to "Democracy dies in darkness."
That's right.
And they made a concerted effort to destroy every single member of the Trump administration. And so, to alienate Trump against his entire administration, you get investigated, you get harassed, you get attacked by the press. And, Trump didn't get us in any wars. Russia didn't invade Ukraine when Trump was charged. Russia invaded Ukraine in 2014 when Biden was the vice president for now our current president, Barack Obama, since he seems to be running things in Washington. Russia invaded again when Biden's president. The world did not push hard against Trump. And when it did, we killed Soleimani, the leading terror organizer for Iran. Did they do anything? No. Terror nations only step back when they get a strong response. They're not easily put off otherwise. Yet the media are running a 24/7 end of the world campaign. I mean, the true apocalypse. And I think a lot of people have tuned it out. It's why they now say that we're not going to get the media bump this election. Media, New York Times, Washington Post, and several other outlets made tons of money, screaming, like their hair was on fire that the end of the world was coming. And when it didn't come, people have now tuned out. They've gone through, 3+ years of the disaster that is the Joe Biden administration. And so they're just like, well, whatever. We're not worried about that. So media outlet after media outlet has had layoffs. Washington Post had buyouts. LA Times just laid off a huge number. CNN and just down the line. Some of these outlets are essentially ceasing to exist. Remember when BuzzFeed and Vice were influential? They're basically barely exist at this point. BuzzFeed's value has dropped, something like 80-90%. It's just ridiculous.
97%.
Thank you.
Yes, BuzzFeed went public in 2021, valued at $1.7 billion, which is crazy, and lost 97% of its value in last year. All right, so John Nolte wrote an article about this. LA Times, when did he write this? Just a couple days ago. All right, so LA Times losing $40 million a year. They cut a third of its staff. Unbelievable. Washington Post lost $100 million in 2023. BuzzFeed laid off 15% of its staff, and they shut down BuzzFeed News entirely. Vice Media filed for bankruptcy. Sports Illustrated shut down the other day. Vogue, Vanity Fair, and Condé Nast layoffs are coming. Jezebel closed down completely. That's unbelievable.
And of course, the total so far layoffs, I think it's 2,681 so far this year, media layoffs. And I mean, Sports Illustrated is a great example. Now, I understand the magazine industry has changed particularly. I mean, you just can't find magazines anymore. They just basically, people don't read them. They became extraordinarily expensive to get to their readers. And most people, anybody under 40 or 45 or maybe even 50 is now reading everything online, a lot of it on their phones. But when Sports Illustrated put transgender alleged women on their cover, they basically gave the finger to their audience. I mean, the Sports Illustrated cover, the swimsuit cover, had been a long-standing, winner with their audience. What women are going to be on there? Where are they going to do the location? It's an annual thing, and then they turn around and they put another one is they put larger women on there. And if you want that, get a different magazine. That wasn't what this was about.
Yeah, well, then they started putting dudes on the front, like dudes in bikinis.
Why
so
would
yeah,
you do
that's
that? Because everything the media do is woke. They've got to push their agenda in everything they do.
So should we lament the fact that many media jobs have been lost? Like, is this bad for the country, or should we celebrate it?
There was a time I might have lamented some of this. I don't anymore, because we're not losing journalism jobs. The journalism jobs that matter to ordinary Americans are local news jobs. These are national propagandists. LA Times is just a propaganda outlet that, pushes Latinx as like it's a legitimate term, even though like 97% of Hispanics don't use it. These are media people who push a narrative, and the way Americans push back is to ignore it. And so, you've got increasingly media people are freaked out because of these layoffs. There was a lot of think pieces you can find out there, like, oh my gosh, the decline of the industry. And now they're upset because some of these outlets, like the LA Times and Washington Post, they're owned by billionaires.
So I don't get it. How can the LA Times?
They're not willing to underwrite the losses. They're like, oh my gosh, well, the problem is people don't want what you're pushing. Nowhere in any of these analyses of what's happened to journalism are they saying that they gave, and decades ago, major media in this country gave the finger to 1/3 of the country and said, we will no longer produce news content that you want. We reject conservatives. All of our content will push the narrative of, oh, look, the poor downtrodden, fill in the blank, minority person, new in this, and we've got to help them change this system. We've got to help them replace this thing. And that's what it's become.
It's amazing that, as you mentioned, the Washington Post is owned by Jeff Bezos, the richest person in the world. And the LA Times is owned by some billionaire as well. And they pour billions into these newspapers and cannot make them work. But you're suggesting it just will never work. It cannot work because of who they're marketing to.
Well, it's not just who they're marketing. It is the people you hire in journalism. So Baltimore Sun was just purchased by an actual conservative. The guy owns Sinclair Media. But he's going to have a heck of a time because almost the entire staff is his enemy. They produced stories basically bashing him. This is he and Armstrong Williams put together this purchase, and it's great that they did. But the challenge is, how do you find enough journalists who are not crazy? This is the newspaper I grew up. I delivered the Evening and Sunday Sun when I was a kid. This is where I grew up.
Here's the headline: The Baltimore Sun's new owner sparks concern over editorial influence. Has that ever been spoken by any left-wing newspaper? Like, was anyone concerned about Jeff Bezos's or any other lefty who owns a newspaper and their editorial influence?
Well, the only time it's spoken is when they're concerned that they might be pro-business or pro something that the journalists aren't. And that's essentially all this comes down to. If your entire staff is liberal, how dare you be a conservative owner and want to produce an opinion page, let's say, that's not so far left of center that Lenin would have found it to be too liberal.
And by the way, Armstrong Williams is black, and apparently that doesn't mean anything.